Today I'll be talking about Robert Schofield. He was my great 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 grandfather, and he fought in the Civil War on the Union side. And I'm going to be sharing information from his obituary with you just shortly here. Colonel Robert Schofield. Among the people who had assembled in GARW Hall last Saturday to attend the funeral of Colonel Robert Schofield, except for the family and personal friends, there were few who had known the entire life of one who 30 years ago was one of the leading citizens of Kilbourne. In his life, here that began just after the Civil War and concluded through prominent and popular relations for more than 30 years, he afforded an instance of the highest ideal of citizenship. His genial manner to all people, his character of a refined, upright man, his high sense of honor, made him one of the really strong men of the community. A man of ever-ready sympathy, qualified by nature to extend the broadest quality or charity under all circumstances, generous in the expression of sympathy to all in trouble, a man with whom association was exalting, and whose friendship was a delight. He held the highest esteem of all who knew him, with a personal magnetism that won strangers. He combined qualities that created the warmest and had lasting of friendships. During many years as manager of Schofield Cottage, in his day one of the most popular resort hotels at the Dells, his acquaintance attending to many remote sections of the Union, and always in the same degree of admiring esteem. He had lived to see nearly all of his lifetime associates passed away, and finally in the darkness and at last in oblivion, he peacefully and gently fell asleep in that long night that brings no awakening to mortality. Failing health led the family to seek the more favorable climate of California for several years until the time came for a longing to spend life's closing hours and its gathering shadows in the old home, to rest at last among the friends of life activities, as near as the grave can be to the associations of the vigorous period of a life that is honored in the community. He was blessed in the gathering shadows of eternity through the years of failing health, and at last almost helplessness, by the untiring devotion and tender care of his wife and son Robert, and thus passed through the shadows in an environment of love and gentle ministration that made the descent into the valley of the shadow of death a way of peaceful resignation and contented waiting. Colonel Robert Schofield won his title and rank in the Civil War by valiant and heroic services that became an official record. From this record has been taken the following details. Robert Schofield was born December 22, 1837, in the township of Carlton, Orleans County, New York. His parents, Robert and Sally Schofield, were descended from New England stock of long standing and reared fine children, only one of whom is now living, Mrs. Joseph Griffith of Kilbourne, Wisconsin. When the war broke out, he was in Battlesboro, Vermont. He enlisted as a private in the 1st Vermont Cavalry in July of 1861 and served through the war. Soon after enlisting, he was made orderly sergeant, and before leaving the state was promoted to first lieutenant. In the fall of 1861, the regiment went to Washington and received orders to join the troops in the Shenandoah Valley. He was in an engagement March 11, 1862, at Winchester, and again on the 23rd, fighting at Strasburg on the 27th. In April, he was in the advance with Banks at Mount Jackson to the covered bridge and went with his chief on the most masterly retreat of the war, during which time they engaged in continuous fighting until Banks had saved the trains. He was in the engagement at Upperville, where his regiment held Bank, held back Stonewall Jackson's infantry till Banks saved his trains. Here his horse was shot from under him. When Pope assumed command of the Army of Virginia, the 1st Vermont Cavalry participated in all the operations on the Rappahannock and Rapidan. In August, they fought near Cedar Mountain. When Pope assumed command of the Army of Virginia, the 1st Vermont Cavalry participated in all the operations on Rappahannock and Rapidan. In August, they fought near Cedar Mountain and at Kelly's Ford. Going to the Second Bull Run on the 30th, they joined the movements after Lee of Maryland. Then followed South Mountain, Antietam, and Gettysburg. He was wounded on July 12th of 1863 at Hagerstown. At Gettysburg, he was ranking captain and led the charge the cavalry made on the left, for which he was promoted to major. The attack was made on a Texas regiment sheltered behind a stone wall. The loss of men was fearful, but they gained an important point. Returning to Hagerstown, the brim of his hat was shot off in the charge. His horse was killed under him, and he was taken prisoner. Here he had a bayonet thrust in his left leg and lost his eye. From General Gordon's headquarters, he was sent to Libby Prison. Here, with others, he suffered the abuse of Turner and Ross for 9 months when they were taken to Macon, Georgia, then to Charleston and placed under fire from the batteries on the islands in the harbor. From there, they went to the Columbia Pen, then to Raleigh and Wilmington for exchange. After the surrender, he took part in the Grand Review and was mustered out. He was a charter member of the John Gillespie Post. At one time, its commander also belonged to the Loyal Legion of the U.S. He was married November 25, 1867, in Kilbourne, Wisconsin, to Josephine, daughter of Alanson and Lucretia E. Wakefield Holly. Her father was a journalist in New York and a pioneer of the press in Wisconsin. 5 children blessed their home: Grace, Marguerite, Hallie, Paul, and Robert. Paul died in 1870 and Grace passed away in 1896. In March of 1865, he was brevetted lieutenant colonel and colonel for meritorious and valiant services in the war. He was a member of the military order of the Loyal Legion of the United States. Funeral services were held in Grand Army Hall Saturday, the funeral address being by Reverend O.E. DeWitt, which was followed by the ritual service of the Grand Army. Post Commander J.E. Jones given the commander's address. The Ladies' Quartet of the Presbyterian Church rendered a talented and appropriate song service. Colonel Schofield was for many years a member of the Presbyterian Church, an earnest, sincere Christian all his life. Okay, well, thank you for viewing it.